No thief approacheth, neither more. Consider the lilies, how they grow. They toil not, they spin not. And yet I say unto you that Solomon in all his glory was not arrayed like one of these. If then God so clothed the grass, which is today in the field and tomorrow is cast into the oven, how much more will he clothe you, O ye of little faith? And seek not ye what ye shall eat or what ye shall drink, neither be ye of doubtful mind. For all these things do the nations of the world seek after, and your Father knoweth that ye have need of these things. But rather seek ye the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added unto you. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell that ye have, and give alms. Provide yourselves bags which wax not old, a treasure in the heavens that faileth not, where no thief approacheth, neither moth corrupteth. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
According to the Holy Scriptures, Yahushai, the Son of the Most High, is set to bring immortality to the nation of Israel, the elect, via establishing the tabernacle of David. As we talk about the second coming of who the world ignorantly calls Jesus Christ, he is coming to take down this current world ruled by Esau, Edom, and establish a righteous kingdom, which is synonymous with the throne of David. That's scriptural, which is a government that's going to run this world in righteousness.
Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Sell that ye have, and give alms. Provide yourselves bags which wax not old, a treasure in the heavens that faileth not, where no thief approacheth, neither moth corrupteth. For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.
This was one of the most
All right. Shalom. First and foremost, we would like to give all praise and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shah, Bahashem, Rakakadash. Double honors unto the apostles and the elders of GMS who rule well, teach well, being great examples towards younger brothers. And peace and blessing, salutation to the Hope Lake out there pushing his word of truth and in sincerity across the four winds. In the name of Yahweh, about your mouth shot, pushing to get up out of here. Shalom to the Hope Lake, the believers and listeners who have came back to the obedience of the scriptures through faith in Yahweh about your mouth shot. All right, with GMS Mississippi Camp. All right, and we're going into a lesson, the form of all things, dealing with the Incan Empire, which was the tribe of Asher. Okay, and this is a lesson, just going into some of Jake, engineering feats, of the ancient world, what they call antiquity, and going into, all right, how, even, today, some of the engineering feats of the Incan Empire, are of use in modern term, and, Esau pushes this narrative. And these lessons that you see us doing lately on Tuesday was inspired by the devil, all right, Matt Walsh, who's, pretty much now we see him, being at the forefront of scientific racism, when it comes to categorizing Jake, as if we're just naturally violent, we're naturally, stupid, we just naturally savages, and without the so-called white man, all right, we will still be in the Stone Ages, and that's the spirit, all right, that devil comes in, all right, which that's an absolute lie, all right, and these devils, all right, and it's going to go into in some of these videos. These devils have to remember the earth was given into their hand. Okay, so they was able to conquer, not because they were superior, because it was the will of the Lord, and we, went off. The northern tribes were going off. In Africa, Jake had, started going off. They had, a remnant of the Hebrew tongue. They had a remnant of some of the customs, but overall, they wasn't, in tune. We wasn't in tune with our power. Okay, and the Lord allowed us to be conquered because prophecy had to be fulfilled. We had to be in this captivity under the so-called white man, all right, before Yahweh Shah will return. Okay, that fulfills the prophecy of Yahweh Shah, coming to deal with Edom, Isaiah 63. So these things, had to take place. All right. And the so-called white man, he's boasting himself is just because he's superior. He bases him being in power just based on him being naturally superior, and we're being naturally inferior, which is a lie. All right, which is nothing but propaganda. So we'll get a few precepts, to start it off with, just to lay a foundation. Then we're going to get, some videos and go into some things, and we'll go from there. So Lord will, you brothers, all right, and you sisters are edified. So you can read that one, bro.
Come on, bro. Can you hear me? The chicken
Yeah,
wire.
yeah, I can
Come
hear
on,
you.
come. This is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 7 and verse 6. It says, "For thou art an holy people until Yahweh Shema Shah thy power. Yahweh Shema Shah thy power has chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all people that are upon the face of the earth."
Yeah, and see, the Lord, chose Israel as his special people. All right. Now they came with a responsibility and an expectation, that we didn't uphold. All right. But the Lord built, all right, Israel different, physically, spiritually, all right, intellectually, mentally. Okay. And that's above people in every way. All right. We don't just run faster and dance better than everyone. No, we think better. All right. We invent better. We're more ingenuitive. Okay. We're more creative in every way. All right, even in our lower state, Israel still, has an edge on these heathens. And that's why, you know, we as a people, even Jake scratched their head like, why are we at the bottom? Jake obviously see that they're better in every way, but why we're at the bottom is because of prophecy, man, because of a punishment, because of the curse. Okay. But as we come back to who we are, one of the things that we begin to heal from is that low self-esteem or this captivity, as if we inferior, man. We know, all right, that the Lord made us, all right, to be a special people. All right, the men, and even, the women of Israel, okay, to be above, all nations of the earth. Okay. So you
Mm-hmm.
can you can read this one, bro. Next scripture.
This is the book of Ecclesiasticus, or the book of Sirach, chapter 10, verse 30, 31. Salakia. Chapter 10, verse 31. He that honoreth in poverty, Salakia, he that is honored in poverty, how much more in riches? And he that is dishonorable in riches, how much more in poverty?
Yeah, and you look at, Jake, even in the impoverished state, Jake is still honored, you know, like
Mhm.
Jake, is still able to draw, you know, the attention of the world, even in our lower state. And that's why you look at the entertainment industry, the sports industry. Well, Jake, is made an icon, and even these Israelites that got money, they're still impoverished when it comes to true power, like Chris Browns, your athletes at the bronze, like they have money, but they don't have power, you
Mhm.
know. And these men are still reverenced, throughout the earth. Your Michael Jacksons, okay. Even Jake that's in the hood that doesn't have any money, all right, can make a skit or sing, all right, on TikTok, and go viral throughout the world. You see? So if Jake is dishonored, in our low condition, how much more, in our wealth, when our riches is really our wisdom, man. You know, that's gonna be the true riches, is us being fully restored to being the gods in the earth, man. How much more we're going to be honored then in our right mind, fully in the kingdom. And Esau, and he's dishonorable in his riches. As you see the world, is beginning to curse this devil out, okay, because he's in his rulership. He's in his influence, and he's all right gaining the reputation of what, of being a dishonorable man. So how much more? Because see, the only reason nations have to deal with Esau, have to put up with this nigga, because the earth is giving it to his hand. Like, they got to trade. He's over the trade, the money, the resources. Then he got the sword. So the nations have to deal with this nigga because of the status and the power that the Lord gave this man in the earth, man.
Mhm.
Okay, but that's why you see the nations is scheming on this devil, man. Because he's a dishonorable man, within his rulership. And how much more is he gonna be dishonored when he's not in power, man? Okay, that's why scriptures speak about Esau, as if what the scripture say, is this the man that made the world to tremble? Okay, because the only thing that's propping this man up is the power that the Lord gave him with the wealth, and the military, man. We got
Mhm.
one more, and we get some video. You finna make a point, bro?
Nah, bro, I want to reread the precept.
You got it.
This is the book of Proverbs, chapter 12, verse 26. The righteous is more excellent than his neighbor, but the way of the wicked seduce them.
Yep, the way of the wicked seducing him. So us in our natural state as Israelites, even at times when we're not on point, with our power, okay, we still have more integrity, more order, okay, and more decency and honor than this devil. Okay, like this what we see now. All right, this crop of Israelites that we see in the earth, this is our people influenced by the wicked, which we was under their influence at one time, but we was brought, all right, out of it by Yahweh Shai, through faith, of hearing his word, repentance, cleaving, to the physician, which is Yahweh Shai. But as you see, as this place continues on, our people get worse and worse because they're seduced, okay, by the ways of the wicked, man. Okay, but Jake in their natural state is not, all right, the Jake that we see today. Even our people post slavery, even though they didn't, fully know the Lord, they didn't have the wisdom. They operated on a much higher level when it came to decency, order, honor, integrity, than what we see now. But it's the ways of the wicked, because Esau incentivizes our people, to act, in the behavior that they act. It's incentivized, man. Okay, so we got a few videos we want to get into, just to show going into the Inca Empire. Remember, these were the tribe of Asher. Okay, now let's start off with this one. Get a couple of them. So play a few minutes of this.
Colombian civilization in the Americas rose from humble beginnings in the Andean highlands to establish an empire that spanned vast territories. The Incas are celebrated for their remarkable organization, technological advancements, and the rich cultural tapestry they wove through military conquest, agricultural innovation, and an intricate political structure. Although their empire came to an abrupt end with the arrival of Spanish conquistadors in the 16th century, the influence of the Incas continues to reverberate through the modern Andean societies. This essay delves into the origins, achievements, societal structure, and lasting legacy of the Inca Empire, providing an in-depth exploration of the empire's power and sophistication. The Andes Mountains, a natural barrier and strategic advantage, formed the geographic core of the Inca Empire. These towering peaks, running along the western edge of South America, played a crucial role in shaping the Incas' way of life, particularly in terms of agriculture, military strategy, and infrastructure development. The mountain range offered a wealth of natural resources, including precious metals, fertile land, and a variety of ecosystems ranging from coastal deserts to high-altitude plateaus. Before the rise of the Inca Empire, the Andean region was already home to advanced civilizations, each contributing to the cultural and technological landscape that the Incas would later inherit. The Mochi, Nazca, Wari, and Tiwanaku civilizations had all left their mark on the region through impressive feats of architecture, art, and agricultural practices. These early societies utilized innovative techniques, such as the cultivation of quinoa and maize, which the Incas would later refine and expand upon. The Incas, however, distinguished themselves through their ability to unify the diverse Andean peoples, harnessing the region's natural resources to fuel their empire's rapid expansion. Their mastery of the environment, combined with a unique ability to adapt to the challenges posed by the rugged terrain, set them apart as one of the most advanced civilizations in the Americas. The story of the Inca Empire's rise begins in the small Andean kingdom of Cuzco, founded around the 12th century CE. According to Inca legend, Manco Capac, the first ruler, was sent by the sun god Inti to establish a kingdom on earth. Over time, the kingdom expanded through a mix of military conquest, alliances, and diplomacy, slowly absorbing surrounding territories. The real expansion of the Inca Empire, however, occurred under the leadership of Pachacuti, who ascended the throne in the mid-15th century. His vision transformed the small, provincial kingdom of Cuzco into a mighty empire stretching from modern-day Colombia to Chile.
And you can see, because Esau always paint, you know, the natives, the indigenous people as if they're just walking around, with a piece of leather around their waist, barely covering them up. Like, nah, man, they had, a embroidery. Our people knew embroidery. They had, animal skin. Okay, they had robes. All right, they had garments. All right, and a lot of Native American had what, the Frenches. Okay. And then all these civilizations, as he said, advanced, civilization, these were all Jakes that had left the Assyrian, okay, captivity and came over here to the Americas, man. All those northern tribes, they came to the Americas and spread out, but you would get that account. All right. Well, we just gonna let it play some more. So Jake was doing their own thing. Okay. And Jake had advanced agriculture. All right. Jake had advanced, administration when it comes to government. Okay, Jake had roadways. You see, abundance of food, abundance, of precious metals and resources. Okay, so let's play some more.
If I may add, bro,
Yeah,
can you
bro.
hear me, bro?
Yeah, I
Can you hear
get.
me out? Yeah, come. If I may add, because you said Esau like to try to paint the picture as like you said, if we were like cavemen or something, and that's who he was. We were, we still went off, as you say, in certain ways, doing certain things, because we were still, not as close to our power as we should have been. But the point of it is, Esau tried to paint the picture as if we was like that caveman who didn't know nothing, like you said, walking around, with a piece of leather on, that's it. And when that's who he was. So Esau tried to flip the script.
Yep, exactly, bro. You know, um, uh, so yeah, let's play this some more. But yeah, and this is what the devil, has been able to do: flip the narrative to where we're the criminals, we're naturally violent when that's his nature, man. Lord will we go into a Thursday. Me and the other brother Yasha Wumble got something lined up about Ratazar. But this nigga is the national, all right, the natural criminal, the natural thief. Okay, as the scriptures say, he's a natural rapist. Okay, the natural anything that's wicked and off. That's his nature to be that. Okay, so like the brother said, this man has done a hell of a job, of giving us his all right characteristics, and he portrays himself with our natural characteristics, man. And through social engineering, behavior modification through the music, the food. Okay, he has fabricated, he has engineered Jake to behave in a way, all right, that fits his propaganda. you know, when they play some
Con.
more. Yeah.
Rule. The Incas introduced a centralized system of government, strengthened their military, and began incorporating conquered peoples into their empire through the practice of mitmakuna, or resettlement. The reign of Pachacuti ushered in what is often referred to as the Inca Golden Age, a period of territorial expansion, military dominance, and cultural development that laid the foundation for the empire's later successes. The Inca Empire was a highly centralized state governed by the Sapa Inca, the emperor, who held absolute power and was considered the divine representative of the sun god Inti on earth. The Sapa Inca was both the political and religious leader of the empire, making his authority uncontested. Beneath him was a class of nobles and officials who helped administer the empire's vast territories. These high-ranking individuals were typically family members or trusted allies of the Sapa Inca, and their loyalty was essential for maintaining the empire's stability. The empire was divided into four major regions or suyu, each ruled by a governor appointed by the Sapa Inca. The four regions were connected by an extensive network of roads, enabling rapid communication and trade across vast distances. Cuzco, the capital, was the heart of the empire, serving as its political, military, and religious center. To ensure the loyalty of conquered peoples, the Incas employed a policy of cultural assimilation. They introduced their language, Quechua, and established an intricate system of tribute and labor, often through the mita system, a form of state-sponsored labor in which communities contributed workers for public projects. The mita allowed the Incas to build their empire's infrastructure, including roads, agricultural terraces, and military fortifications, while also maintaining control over their vast territories. The economic foundation of the Inca Empire was agriculture, and the Incas were masters of maximizing their land's potential. The rugged Andean terrain presented significant challenges, yet the Incas developed sophisticated farming techniques to ensure the stability of their empire. They constructed vast terrace farming systems on steep mountain slopes, creating flat areas for the cultivation of crops. These terraces were supported by intricate irrigation systems that diverted water from mountain springs and rivers, allowing them to irrigate crops in even the most arid regions. The Incas cultivated a variety of crops, including maize, potatoes, quinoa, and coca, which formed the backbone of their diet and economy. Potatoes, in particular, became a staple crop, and the Incas developed numerous varieties suited for different ecological zones. The practice of freeze-drying potatoes into chuño allowed the Incas to store food for long periods, ensuring food security during times of scarcity. The Incas also managed an extensive trade network that spanned their entire empire, facilitating the exchange of goods such as textiles, ceramics, and luxury items. Despite the lack of a traditional currency, the Incas used a system of exchange based on goods and labor. Their vast network of roads, including the renowned Capac Ñan, allowed goods to flow efficiently across the empire, ensuring the equitable distribution of resources. Religion was at the core of Inca life, and the Incas were deeply spiritual, viewing their empire as a divine creation. The sun god Inti was the central deity, and the Sapa
Yeah, so that's, the point on that one. And it just shows you, just the advanced, civilization that they had, to even turn, their mountainous, rugged, dry in some places to rain into a place of abundance when it came to agriculture. This is what you call a agrarian, society where agriculture, is the economy. And that's what we had, in our homeland. Okay. You look at Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Job. Well, how were they wealthy? They was wealthy in agriculture, livestock, lands. Okay. They had servants. All right. They had, precious, metals, which they had gold and silver. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Job. Okay. And they grew wealthy in trade, because they had resources, So you see the Inca people, all right, which is the tribe of Asher, they still, even in the worstest conditions, you know, they have that adaptability because they're still the sons of God, And as you see, they was into worshiping the sun god because the northern tribe took a lot of the Egyptian culture and brought it over here, as they coming from the Assyrian empire, which in the time, Egypt, Syria, and they had different political alliances and different things. But even going back to the captivity that we served under Egypt, the northern tribe took, a lot of those customs. Okay, there we go. Yeah, the northern tribe took a lot of those Egyptian customs over here to America. That's why you have a lot of those pyramids, even in South America. All right, so let's go here. You want to say something, bro?
Bro, just really adding to what you were saying as far as the what we said at first, the adaptability. Being able to like it's just in us. It's just who we are. No matter what we put our hands on or what we do, it's just in us to make it better. And then like you said, it's just who we are, bro. It's in Esau for him to be destructive, to basically mess everything up. But that's just really going into kind of what we said earlier. And then we kind of just saw the proof there how they took, like you said, something small, or something not really small, but something that just was nothing, and they was able to adapt to the whole entire situation, and also build and also make it more efficient for everybody amongst the empire. Like you said, they lived off of like that labor and trade system. So everybody, it was a system of goodwill. Like they had the true resources, which we always go into that. This FRN paper money. This ain't real resources. It ain't even worth the shit that it is on. I think it costs like what 5 to 7 cents to make a penny or something like that. But the point is, those true resources are in your livestock, your crop, your grain, your land. Those are true resources. But Esau is taking all the true resources and gives everybody else the fake FRN, the paper money, so you can trade it, and he basically has control.
Kind of, bro. And and if I can add, think about how many carpenters and craftsmen and engineers, that they had to have, to pull it off. So it was just a nation of skilled laborers, man. The women had to be on point, turning those crops into, food and usable, edible things. So it was a high level people, It was like a super duper homestead, you know.
Yeah,
So I got this. I want you to read, bro. You can make your point, but after that, just read Genesis 26:12 through 14.
and throughout, bro, your word had to mean something because it said it was based off skill and labor, meaning that if you came over and you helped me, with something, it was an expectation that when you needed me, that the same way we live today, as far as those of us, amongst the brothers, it's that same way. It's a we look out for each other. Your word actually means something, and today your word don't really mean shit to people. People's word doesn't really mean anything today.
Come on, bro. Uh,
Come,
so you can read that, bro.
come. This said Genesis 26:12 through 14. It says when Isaac planted his crops that year, he harvested 100 times more grain than he planted. For Yahweh Shema Shah blessed him.
See, our people, even go back to Isaac. Like I said, they was rich, within agriculture, which that's true resources. And see, the people are going to see, their money, all right, the money that people, and then the things that people buy with their money, because people don't even buy, assets with their money. People buy, you know, you buy multiple cars because after 1 or 2 cars per person, then you're doing too much, because that's not efficient for you, unless it's for work purposes. You might be somebody that, you in the transportation industry or whatever, use your cars to work, but just for personal use, really after 1 or 2 cars, really you're doing too much, and it don't serve any purpose, man. See, and then even these people with all these houses, man, those things are not going to mean anything, all right? Because think about it. What's the use of a mansion, all right, if you run out of food in that mansion? You You can have a 40,000 square foot, house, but if there's no food in there in the time of famine, then what's the point of that house? Okay, you can have, 2 or 3 cars, 4 cars, the latest, and the one of 200 cars, whatever. Well, what's the use of that? Okay, when there's no water, you don't have access to water. Okay, so true wealth are things that that first off reproduce itself, a resource, and secondly, you can turn it, into something useful. All right, without any middlemen. Okay, because going to the grocery store, you're going through 2 or 3 middlemen, and you get the finished product. Okay, but our forefathers was rich in the actual resource. Okay, not the like you say, the government issued, all right, debt notes to where you have a measure of how many resources you can get. Okay, so when you go back, Isaac, planted his crops that year, and he harvested 100 times more grain than he planted. Okay, so the Lord, will give, our forefathers great increase, and even like I say, the northern tribes, they was off, but the Lord still, will bless them to a degree before, it was time for them to be judged, by these devils, So you keep going, bro.
Verse 13, it says he became a very rich man, and his wealth continued to grow.
Go ahead.
Verse 14, he acquired so many flocks of sheep and goats, herds of cattle, and servants that the Philistines became jealous of him.
Yeah, so our forefather Isaac was rich in agriculture, okay, and resources, true resources, okay, even servants, even people, okay. So you see, when you go to these ancient empires, because Esau, I guess because what that nigga said, Matt Walsh talking about some the uh 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 the English had the printing press. When we came over here, we already had the printing press in Europe. All right, well, who gives a damn about a printing press? Like if you stayed in in the Central South America, all right, what the hell you need with a printing press? Okay, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, that's cute because you got your look, and then all that's just them Edomites. Well, them Edomites in Europe, they inherited the culture that Jake, all right, set up over there when it comes to the class and the etiquette, the classical music, the balls, the palaces, the architecture. They inherited that from Jake. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't come up with that on their own. All right. But then these inventions that they boast about that they came when Europe already had this and had that. Well, Europe is a different land, all right, a different terrain. I can't take, you know what I'm saying? We can't take our knowledge. Here it is, we in Mississippi. If we farm in Mississippi, we can't take the same farming techniques to Arizona. It's not gonna work.
And all.
You see what I'm saying? Like something different. You see, even in the same country. Okay,
God.
so talking about a damn printing press.
And
Okay,
then, bro, go
no, you got it, bro.
and then even then, like we were going into a few weeks back, most of those inventions, like it was a Jake that invented, the core parts to a lot of those inventions that they actually used.
Yeah,
And then like if things were the way that they supposed to, you probably wouldn't even need a print press, bro, because you had the elders to teach you. You had, everything had its own way already being done. Esau just took what something that Jake had invented and basically found a way to use it for himself to make it feel like he was doing something right for society when this man can't adapt at all. That's why no matter what part of the region he go to, he tries to inflict he tried to inflict the Hellenized or the Westernized or modernized, either one of those words you can use, they all mean the same thing in this context. That's why no matter what part of the region he goes to, he wants to change their culture because Esau can't adapt to shit but wickedness.
mm-hmm. Come, the border of wickedness, as the scriptures say. So we're gonna play a little bit of this one. You know what I'm saying? We got about 2 more. All right, we're gonna play just a snippet of this one. because he made a point I want to emphasize on. But we're gonna play this one, and we got two more after this.
Intricate highway systems, commanded powerful warriors, and inspired one of the greatest Disney movies, The Emperor's New Groove. But as legendary as the rise of the most powerful empire in South America was, its downfall was equally historic. Today, we're telling you all the most interesting facts about the Inca Empire. But before we do, why don't you conquer that subscribe button? Then head down to the comments and let us know what other ancient empires you want to hear about. For now, time to get Inca hoots. The Inca originated in South America in the Andes Mountains around the 12th century. According to Inca legend, Inti, the sun god, created the whole civilization by sending his son to Earth. Where have you heard that story before? The Inca first referred to themselves as Tawantinsuyu, which means the four regions together, referring to four different areas they had conquered, each with their own unique environments, crops, and population. You should start referring to yourself as that when you play Risk. From their humble mountaintop beginnings, the empire would go on to span roughly 2,500 miles. That was enough to run through present-day Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, and Chile. Geez, save some of South America for the rest of us. And they didn't just conquer their lands willy-nilly either. The Inca were smart about it, leaving soldiers behind to maintain order and peace in their newly acquired land. The Incas really began to thrive after Sapa Inca, or paramount leader, Pachacuti Cusi Yupanqui, was crowned in 1438. Under his extraordinary reign, the Inca Empire expanded thousands of miles north and south. He also made up the rule that said royal successors don't inherit any of this land. So you better get busy conquering on your own, son. But Pachacuti wasn't just interested in expansion of his domain. He also spent time furthering his existing towns by creating intricate irrigation systems, allowing farming to boom. And that's just one example of the amazing things the Inca people were able to create. When you're stuck on the highway during your commute and are looking for someone to blame, why not the Inca Empire? One of their all-time greatest accomplishments was their vast system of highways. The Great Inca Road, as it was known, was somewhere in the neighborhood of 25,000 miles of roads and bridges that stretched all throughout the Inca Empire's domain. And most of the drivers still won't let us merge. Come on, Incas, move! They were able to build with exact measurements by using something called the quipu, which was a device made of data recording strings and knots, sort of the USB storage drive of its time. Each string contained varieties of different information such as measurements, census information, financial records, and more. Using this data, Inca builders could make calculated designs, creating things like suspension bridges made of ichu grass and earthquake-resistant buildings made of dry-fitted masonry. Just don't get the strings tangled up. It's like trying to separate Christmas lights, except if you screw up, you blow up a bridge. Come on, Kipu, separate!
So you seen, how the Incas were able to build, with exact measurements, with using those screens that they had of recorded data, so it was like a like he said, it was like a USB of his time, and that's crazy, how they was able, because you deal with those measurements, it lets you know the population, because even like now, when you build roads coming through a city, well, based on the population, that's how many lanes, you get approved for, because a city with a population of 40,000, all right, you're not going to have as many lanes as a city with a population of 400,000, so just based off those records and those exact numbers, when they did build, they built for their city, so you will have a census in that information, you will have exact measurements of what type of road, what type of bridge, so like you said, it was a sophisticated, system that they had even back then, when it came to engineering, so I thought that was interesting, man. All right. So when these devils came, because that devil Matt Walsh said, well, it wasn't no laws, they didn't have, this is he said we took the land because it wasn't any laws, so only the law, like it was just the law of the jungle over here, man. But nah, man, they had extremely sophisticated system of government, man. All right. And this uh this next one gonna go into some more engineering. Then we're gonna go into, like you were talking about earlier. They had an honor system. Where the people benefited. The government really benefited the people. But you didn't make a point, bro.
They just going, like you said, they had their own way of, we had their own way of storing information, bro. So we didn't need all the Esau's advancements and everything like that. They had their own way of our own way of doing everything. Storing information, building. Like you said, there was a law and there was a way everything was done. It was order. And Esau came along and just like he wanted to make, like you said, he wanted to make it seem like he was just doing this great. He's doing this great deed to the world. When you seeing the harvest of everything this devil has done, because he'll turn around and say, Esau come and take over, and then burn everything, and then try to say, oh well, there was nothing. Oh, they was living like this or X, Y, and Z. Those niggas, that's because most of the shit you burned, you got rid of it. So now you can say that nothing that we had no way of really doing anything. And most Jake is not finna dive into the history and get into it. So it's easier for them to believe that shit.
Come on, bro. So we're gonna go into this. So this is gonna deal with some more engineering. All right. And that's the point we're going into this, like the brother was saying. Just to shed light, on how, our people, the tribes, how they was always very ingenuitive, engineers, all right. They was pioneers, when it came to everything, and even in the most difficult situations, all right, they would build, empires. Okay. So let's let this one play. It's gonna go to some more of the engineering of Incas.
The Andes Mountains contain many stunning natural wonders that draw visitors from around the world. But among the soaring peaks and lush jungles lie ancient ruins that seem to defy nature's laws. How did the Incas construct structures with precisely joined colossal stones without any mortar or modern machinery? Why have ancient Inca suspension bridges, roads, and aqueducts survived largely intact through over 500 years of tremors and weathering? What ingenious engineering secrets did the Incas possess that enabled their civilization to not merely endure but thrive and flourish in the challenging Andean terrain? In this video, we'll explore the many marvels of Inca engineering. We'll see how they applied their profound understanding of materials, physics, and geology to develop infrastructure perfectly adapted to the Andean landscape. We'll also consider what lessons from the Incas' harmonious engineering can inspire more sustainable infrastructure today. The foundation of the Inca Empire emerged in the 15th century in the Cusco region of modern-day Peru. From this base, the Incas expanded to eventually reign over a vast swath of western South America, encompassing parts of present-day Ecuador, Bolivia, Chile, Colombia, and Argentina. This tremendous empire, over 2,500 miles long, incorporated great ecological and cultural diversity. From the arid Peruvian coast to the soaring Andes Mountains, to the steamy Amazon jungle. Yet the Incas unified this realm through a common language, a unified bureaucracy, and an extensive road system. The Incas constructed over 25,000 miles of roads to effectively administer their empire. This astonishing feat of engineering is known as the Capac Nan, meaning royal road in the Quechua language. The Capac Nan allowed the Incas to govern, trade, and move armies efficiently throughout the rugged and vertical Andean terrain of peaks, valleys, and rivers. The design and engineering of the Inca roads allowed them to overcome tremendous geographic obstacles. The roads zigzagged up steep slopes at optimal grades for llama caravans. Stairways were carved right into sheer cliff faces, while rope bridges gracefully spanned river gorges below. In rugged highland areas, the Incas built stone causeways, retaining walls and drainage ditches to maintain a smooth, durable road surface safe from landslides and erosion. The Capac Nan served many vital purposes. It tied together the diverse lands of the empire, facilitating state control and unifying the people. It connected isolated villages to larger regional hubs and allowed goods to be efficiently traded between coast, mountains, and jungle. This exchange enriched the empire's economy and allowed cities to prosper. The road network also carried news, culture, and ideas, enriching the shared Inca identity. In short, The Kapaknan was the circulatory system that enabled the Inca Empire to thrive against extreme geographical odds. It stands today as one of the greatest road engineering accomplishments in human history. Constructed right into the Kapaknan were ingenious structures that provided vital river crossings.
You see that building the size of several football fields just behind me? What's happening inside?
These one-of-a-kind bridges spanned long distances, with some clearing lengths over 130 feet across raging mountain rivers below. The design consisted of thick cables made from woven grass ropes, anchored into stone pillars constructed on opposite banks. Huge wooden slats provided the flooring, while smaller grass ropes lined the sides as handrails. The grass cables had the ideal balance of flexibility to handle forces from wind and earthquakes, yet strength to support the weight of human traffic, llama caravans, and even horses. Inca engineers constantly monitored the bridges and replaced worn ropes and other parts as needed. With this ongoing maintenance, some of these grass rope suspension bridges remained in use for many decades and likely even centuries. The greatest remaining example is the rebuilt bridge of Huinchiri. Local Quechua families have faithfully reconstructed and maintained the crossing for over 500 years, using the same materials and methods as their Inca ancestors. The bridge demonstrates how the ancient Incas maximized the structural properties of local raw materials to craft suspension bridges with impressive strength, stability, and longevity. The Incas were equally as skilled when it came to hydraulic engineering, devising irrigation solutions ideal for the arid mountainous terrain. The Incas developed aqueduct technologies to channel water from distant glacial-fed rivers and streams to nourish farmland and grow urban centers. The Incas built masterful irrigation canals spanning hundreds of kilometers across valleys and plateaus. Channels were precisely engineered with impermeable rock walls and floors expertly leveled to maintain optimal water flow grades. Some aqueduct systems utilize dual channels, one to transport pristine drinking and bathing water, and another for agriculture and sanitation. Remarkable sites like Tipan near Cusco display the ingenious stone-lined canals the Incas crafted to transform rocky slopes into productive agricultural terraces. Similarly, grand aqueducts supply the sprawling urban centers of Machu Picchu and Cusco with ample fresh water. As the Inca population boomed, their innovative hydraulic works enabled crops and civilization to flourish, despite the geographical challenges. The Inca Empire was able to construct such impressive infrastructure and architecture without many technologies and techniques we consider essential today, including metal tools, the wheel, and even mortar. So just how did they manage to build such ornate temples, imposing fortresses and precisely fitted walls from stones weighing many tons? The Incas were masters at choosing rocks with natural fracture planes, and then levering and hammering these cracks to precisely split blocks. Without mortar, walls were assembled from blocks with perfectly flat faces and many angles interlocking for stability. The masonry had tiny gaps allowing flexibility during seismic activity. Chisels, drills, and polishing tools made from copper, bronze, and abrasive sands achieved precise finishing. Moving massive blocks was made possible through sheer human effort. Massive teams used ropes, ramps, levers, and rollers to incrementally slide megaliths along freshly flattened roads. The Incas also cleverly incorporated natural topography into construction plans, allowing blocks to be slid downward into structures built on man-made terraces and foothills. But the greatest secret to Inca architectural mastery was their harmonious engineering tailored for the environment. Walls tilted slightly inwards, and trapezoidal windows distributed structural forces. Buildings were designed to flex and settle with seismic shocks. Hydraulic elements flowed cooperatively with nature's gravity, load, and absorption rate. Local ambient materials were used to their fullest potential. In short, Inca engineers found optimal techniques to complement the natural world. Guided by cultural wisdom passed down generations, their infrastructure sustainably integrated natural forces, embodying adaptive design millennia before the term existed. Tragically, the arrival of Spanish conquistadors.
Then your boy pull up. But that's crazy. You know what I'm saying? That they had earthquake proof. They had earthquake proof infrastructure. You know? And then it said how the walls tilted inwardly, to absorb, the seismic movement, which was, earthquakes, So they had earthquake proof, all right, or resistance infrastructures back then. All right. Now he's gonna go into your your man's pulling up. All right. Goddamn All right. And see, these devil. This is what they showed up to: a well-oiled machine. You see, these devils showed up to a well-oiled machine. All right. We're gonna come back to them devils showing up because they're gonna end it out with that. But I'm gonna play this other video about the money, and then we'll end it. With them niggas popping up.
You know, Esau always got to show up and be like, "Damn, they actually figuring it out over there."
Yep. Yep. How can I mess this up? A real nigga pulled up, So let's play this one.
Did you know that the Incan Empire had no concept of money? That's right. The Inca Empire is probably the only civilization in history to have no class of traders and no commerce of any kind within its boundaries. And despite having no concept of money or markets, they were able to build a thriving empire larger in size than Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and the UK combined. And it's even more surprising that they were highly urbanized. Their largest city and capital was called Cusco, and it boasted a population of 150,000 people. For comparison, the population of London at the time was only 50,000. So how did the Incan economy manage to function without money and market, and that too so effectively? Well, that's the question that we're going to be answering in today's video. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and let's get right into it. The birth of civilization came with the birth of money and commerce, and that's all true except in the case of the Andeans, of which the Inca are the best known. They developed highly sophisticated planned cities, and they were master builders and land planners. They constructed massive pyramids and sustained highly complex mountain irrigation projects. All of this was done by people who were paid no salaries, and they paid no taxes in return either. So why is this? What exactly enabled the Incan society to function and prosper this way? And there are two aspects to that answer that defined the Incan economy. One was central planning, and the other was labor as a unit of wealth. You see, all economic activity was centrally planned. Now, normally we'd think of someone as wealthy if they had a lot of money. However, in the Incan economy, it was someone who could feed a large labor force. Then they were considered quote-unquote wealthy. You see, food was their coin. And so instead of paying taxes in money, every Incan was required to provide labor to the state. The government, in return, would provide them with all of life's necessities. This would include food, tools, raw materials, and clothing. Now, not everybody had to pay labor tax. The higher-ranking nobility and the clergy were actually exempt from this kind of labor tax, but it can be said that they did provide their fair share by performing religious and administrative services. Now, this is not to say that everybody was entirely dependent on the state. You see, ordinary people were free to engage in their own enterprises as well, and people exchanged favors instead of paying each other money. People were expected to help cultivate their neighbor's land and expected the neighbors would pay them back in due course. It was a really good system. Because labor and not money dictated wealth, it meant that laborers had to be very well kept and looked after. Otherwise, there was no incentive for the laborers to buy into this kind of system. That's precisely why the Incan Empire had one of the most comprehensive welfare systems in the world. And this is especially surprising given that we're talking about medieval times right now. It's an era known for its relative cruelty and its violent existence. And here we are talking about universal welfare. Part of this was also land ownership. You see, unlike other medieval societies, in the Incan Empire, the land around a village wasn't owned by some powerful landlord. Rather, it was communally owned by the villagers themselves for their own welfare. It was a pretty neat system. You see, when a couple got married, the state would provide them with their own plot of land to cultivate, and then the size of this plot would increase with the birth of each child. And taking care of the sick, the elderly, and the disabled was also a shared responsibility trusted upon by the village themselves. Beyond this, each family was also given 2 llamas for use. Owning livestock in pre-modern times was a big deal anyway. And here we have the Incan state providing it to people for free. The Incan state also reserved stocks of goods for public uses in case of emergencies, such as during the times of drought. Now, given all of this, you're probably thinking that the Incan Empire was this magical place where everything ran smoothly and everyone was happy. Well, it wasn't a perfect utopia. You see, inequality still existed, with nobles and clergies enjoying far more privileged access to the state resources than the normal folks. There were also other problems that we would see in any other civilization around that time. This would include crime, forced military service, forced relocation of lands, and more. So yeah, it wasn't perfect. Nevertheless, the Incas remain a rare example of a pre-modern society where the social system wasn't simply built to benefit those who ruled, but also the masses being ruled over. But the good times don't last. Unfortunately for them, Columbus had successfully made an expedition to the New World around 1492. He went back to the Old World to tell his tales, and now it was only a matter of time before the Europeans would come bearing guns, germs, and steel. Old World diseases weakened the Incas, killing many, including their ruler. Faced with multiple crises, the country would be plunged into a civil war, and the arriving Spaniards would eventually take full advantage of this, ultimately conquering this vast empire. As a result, most of the Incans would be enslaved. They would be forced into labor in the mines and plantations of their new overlords. Many would be overworked to death and succumb to diseases from their brutal work conditions. The extracted wealth, taking all of this into consideration, in hindsight, while I
There you have it. And see, that was a push as if they came and civilized us. No, they came. All right, let's just get the precept. Because we was warned. This is all a punishment too. First let's get this. Leviticus. Because we always go to Deuteronomy 28, and we go to the curses, but this is some curses too. When you look at this, especially with the Northern Kingdom. Now, when you go here, you can read verse 16, bro. This is the NLT. You got it.
Come on, this is the book of Leviticus, chapter 26, verse 16, NLT. It says, I will punish you and will bring sudden terrors upon you, wasting diseases and burning fevers that will cause your eyes to fail and your life to evil away. You will plant your crops in vain because your enemies will eat them.
Yeah, so we're seeing this, the conquistadors pull up, okay, and they just start pillaging, and they had them guns, they had them cannons, they had that metal armor, that the Incas couldn't penetrate, and ultimately that was the Lord, punishing, the northern tribes, the conquistadors jumped it off, man, okay, but to put it like if these devils came, and stopped Jake from warring with themselves, and he intervened and made them into these, these wholesome Christians. Like, what part of the narrative is that? Okay, so when you jump down some more, I think is read verse 25.
Come on, Leviticus 26 and 25 NLT. It says, I will send armies against you to carry out. Hold on. Block it, bro. Pop up. It says, I will send armies against you to carry out the curse of the covenant you have broken. When you run to your towns for safety, I will send a plague to destroy you there, and you will be handed over to your enemies.
Yeah, so the Incas, they got defeated militarily and, with disease. Okay. And the Lord just put the spirit on Esau, to just be unstoppable, man. Because like I say, they had that armor that the Incas really couldn't penetrate. And they thought this nigga was, invincible. Like this nigga was a real guy, So Esau, pushed his narrative as if, they came and it was just a battle royal between all the natives. Like they didn't have civilization going on. Like they didn't have advanced, government and administration and laws. Nah, man, they just showed they had a system with no money to where you had an honor system, man. And to bring it in modern terms, it'd be like, okay, if I go help this brother, get his land ready to till, in March, well, in April, when it's time for my land to be tilled and get ready for crops, the brother will come help me, you know,
Mm-hmm.
instead of me paying the brother $300 to help me, and then he later on next month I pay him 300. You know, he paid me 300 to help him. You would just exchange labor, okay? And you had an honor system, and everybody in the government had a supply. They took care of everyone. Then it said when you got married, you got new land, and when you had a child, you get more land. Every child that you had more land. So they had sophisticated government set up. Like the Inca population was like 10 million people. Okay, you had that devil Matt Walsh talking about, see, you want number 25, 30,000 people in this part of America, and you can walk 2 months and not see nobody and all this old shit. Nigga, you don't know. Yeah, that nigga don't know. Esau used to just pulling numbers out his ass, man.
Yep.
Okay. Like he was there. All right. So let's go here with it. Yahweh Shah told us about this nigga, man. All right. This is the only thing that these niggas have done consistently in the earth. And we're gonna read it here. This St. John 10 and 10. Then we'll get one more. Let me see. NLT might be hit too. Yeah, you can read it in NLT. Yep.
Come, it's the book of St. John, chapter 10, verse 10, NLT. The thief's purpose is to steal and kill and destroy. My purpose is given to them a rich and satisfying life.
Yeah, see, this is what Esau brought to the game. Okay? Death, robbery, and destruction. This is what this nigga brought to civilization. Okay? So this whole thing of like this nigga being some hero and he the one that pulled the earth, out of the stone age into this modern age that everyone enjoys, the convenience of. All right, it's some bullshit, man, some BS. Okay? And at the end of the day, all right, when Yahweh Shah returns, he's coming to set everything right, man. Because within, this punishment of the devil coming back into power and rule, all right, there's an elect of Israel, okay, that as the scriptures say, have thirst for righteousness now. The scriptures say, it is good that I have been afflicted, uh, to pretty much to observe, all right, your statutes, man. So we had to be punished to appreciate righteousness, man. But as we've turned back, to our power and we're coming back in good standings, okay, this is what's getting ready to happen, man. All right, you read this in Jeremiah 30 and 16 and 17, bro.
Come, it's Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 16 and 17, KJV. Therefore, all they that devour thee shall be devoured, and
Yep.
all thine adversaries, every one of them, shall go into captivity.
I'll read that
And
again.
what'd you say?
You read from top again, Shalaki, bro.
Come, I got you. Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 16 and 17, KJV. It says, therefore, all they that devour thee shall be devoured, and all thine enemies, every one of them, shall go into captivity. And they that spoil thee shall be a spoil, and all that prey upon thee shall it's like it says, I will restore health unto them, and I will heal thee of all of I will heal thee of thy wounds, saith Yahweh Shema Shai, because they caused thee, because they called thee an outcast, saying, this is Zion, whom no man seeketh after.
Yeah, so just as we've been spoiled as a people, and went into captivity, well, now the Lord is going to allow the captives, okay, to take their oppressors into captivity. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to spoil, we're going to get that labor out of Esau that he got out of us, man. Okay. And we're going to be restored, and we're being restored back to health now, but we're going to be perfected at the return of Yahweh Shah. So as I said, we have a lot to look forward to, man. We've been through a lot as a people, and you just look at, even before, Esau came, Jake had functioning, thriving civilizations, and the Incas are just one of many. We just focus on them, so we'll keep it going into, the Aztecs, the Mayans, all right, just different civilizations, before Esau, and even, post slavery civilizations, or communities after, post slavery, before the enchantment started, in the 60s, beginning with the civil rights and feminist movement, you know. So that's the point. Just wanted to tap into a little bit of that, Lord will. All right, you brothers and you sisters edify. You had something else to say before we close out, bro?
Nah, bro, that was it.
Okay, come here with that. We pray you brothers and sisters edify. Till next time, we say Shalom. Kwame Mashallah, Abba, soon. Shalom.
Shalom.